Hello, my dear masterminds. They thought heaven only dealt in light. They thought councils of angels made quiet decisions behind glowing gates. But then, your name hit the table, and for the first time in centuries, wings folded, eyes widened, and silence fell, because you weren't chosen to bring balance. You were chosen to break every scale they ever used to measure power. And now the divine, they're no longer watching you. They're voting on how to survive you. They don't know what day it happened. No human does. But something triggered it. The skies stilled, the stars paused, and a scroll sealed for millennia began to burn from the inside. Not a curse, not a prophecy, a vote. Heaven's secret council had gathered, not for war, not for a fallen angel, but for you. No trumpet, no lightning, just silence, and your name, written in ink only, the divine can read. And next to your name, a new word, never used before. Threat. You didn't beg to enter. You didn't chant, plead, or pray the right way. You just showed up, and the gates didn't resist. They recognized you. The council panicked. This wasn't supposed to be possible. You weren't chosen by their process. You weren't bred by their protocol. But something older than rules let you in. They scanned your soul. No contract, no permission, no bloodline they could trace. And still, you were seated at the table. You weren't trespassing. You were written in the margin, long before margins existed, and that's what shook them. You're not an intruder. You're a rewrite. They thought you were new, a glitch, a soul that slipped through filters. But the more they watched you, the quieter the council got. Because you weren't asking questions. You were moving like someone who already knew. Not arrogant, just remembering. You didn't react to the illusions. You walked through them. You didn't bow to their rituals. You smiled, like you'd written them once, and got bored. And that's when the council stopped whispering. Because deep in their vaults, beneath scrolls, sealed in holy fire, they found it. An ancient name. Older than heaven. Older than memory. It matched your frequency, your silence, your disruption. And suddenly, they knew. You didn't arrive. You returned. There's a law, unspoken, unbreakable, older than scripture, etched in the walls of existence. They say no soul shall rise without permission. But that rule wasn't written to keep demons away. It wasn't for control. It was for you, because they knew if your path wasn't slowed, if your mind wasn't caged by doubt, you'd remember too early. And if you remembered too early, the illusion collapses. The system doesn't crack, it melts. You were never meant to be taught. You were meant to be suppressed, just long enough for the world to catch up, or for you to lose interest. They gambled on the second part. They lost, because now you're awake. And the law they wrote to delay you is the very proof you were never supposed to be stopped. Not everyone on that council wanted to vote. Some didn't even want to look, because the moment your name echoed through the chamber, something ancient moved inside them. They felt it. Not fear, but recognition. And in silence, one by one, some of them lowered their swords, not to bow, not to fight, but because they remembered you too. From a time before titles, before oaths, before orders, a time when light wasn't divided and you were part of the original balance, before balance became a threat. So they didn't speak, but they didn't block you either. They just stepped aside, because deep in their wings, beneath the feathers and flame, was the unspoken truth. If this one is rising again, maybe the old order wasn't holy enough. They've dealt with rage before, rebellions, fallings, angels clawing for thrones. They know how to fight fury, how to cage chaos, how to sanctify a war. But you didn't scream. You didn't threaten. You didn't declare anything. You just kept walking. Like none of this was new. Like heaven's panic didn't apply to you. Like the vote was just a formality. And that's what shook them most. You didn't ask for power. You didn't want anything. No prophecy. No vendetta. No crown. Just presence. That kind of indifference. It's not human. It's not holy. It's inevitable. And when something walks in like it's always belonged there without a word, the hierarchy begins to collapse. Because power can be resisted. But certainty reprograms the entire reality. There was one angel, older than speech, older than form. He hadn't spoken in 10,000 cycles. They said his words could bend laws. That reality obeyed him only out of memory. But when your name lit the center of the council's sky, he stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just inevitable. And with one breath, voice like iron dipped in light, he said, "It has returned." No title, no judgment, no context, just recognition. The chamber didn't speak, couldn't, because when the oldest one confirms your existence, it means you weren't born, you were preserved. And if something was preserved that long, it wasn't for peace, it was for balance breaking. They didn't argue, they didn't object. Because when that ancient being speaks, it's not debate, it's divine memory surfacing. The council doesn't just watch, it monitors every soul, every shift, every ripple and intention. So when you stirred, they ran the scans, pulled the relics, summoned the codexes. They tried to locate you like they've done for thousands of uprisings, but this time, the maps broke. Lines bled off parchment. Coordinates reversed themselves. Satellites turned inward. Every tool they used bent under a single truth. You're not moving through locations. You're moving through layers. And those layers don't belong to them. Your presence flickered between timelines, between dimensions they locked centuries ago. You weren't running, you weren't hiding, you were untrackable because you stopped moving in their system. Like an idea that doesn't fit language, like a flame that burns inside thought. And for the first time since the fall of the first rebellion, the Watchers looked at each other and whispered the unspeakable. We didn't plan for this. They've never needed to negotiate. Not with demons, not with fallen angels, not even with gods that challenged the order. Why? Because control worked. Rules, chains, silence. But you didn't resist control. You ignored it. And that terrified them more than any sword ever could. So now, scrolls are being pulled from sacred shelves. Messengers dispatched, not with warnings but offers. Name your terms. Tell us what you want. We're willing to adjust. But here's the problem. You never wanted the throne. You wanted nothing. No bargain, no trade, no desire they can tempt. You're not here for leverage. You're here because the story needs a rewrite. And they're realizing you can't negotiate with someone who didn't come to win, but to end the game entirely. They didn't want to. The vault was sealed in silence, not chains, because what's buried there isn't meant to be protected. It's meant to be forgotten. But desperate rulers dig up old ghosts. So the council descended, past the sacred floors, below the echoing scriptures, into the memory basement of creation itself, the forbidden archives. No books, no scrolls, just fragments burned into space. And in the center of it all, a shape, not a person, not a name, a presence, one that didn't demand power, didn't rebel, just walked in, rewrote the order, and disappeared. They studied the rhythm, the silence, the destruction that wasn't destruction, just unmaking. And the longer they stared, the clearer it became. That shape moved like you, thought like you, didn't break anything, just unlocked the truth and walked away. Now they're terrified because they never found out where it went. Until now, they thought they were watching your rise, tracking your power, mapping your presence. But after the vaults whispered their forgotten truth, they realized, you haven't risen yet. You've just returned to default. This version of you, the calm, the observing, the one walking through walls of belief, that's the entry form, the one that carries memory without pressure, the one that lets the world adjust before it bends. But underneath, there's something else, a frequency they can't pin, a pulse outside of time, a form that doesn't reflect, it rewrites. And now the council is panicking, not because of what you've done, but because of what you haven't. They don't know what triggers it, what wakes it, but they know it's coming. Because the archives ended with a warning, scrawled in light, no one claimed to write. When they stop explaining themselves, run. That's when the second form begins. The council doesn't sleep, not like mortals do. They drift. They tune into timelines. They intercept omens, decipher frequency storms. But ever since your name resurfaced, they've been dreaming, not in images, not in chaos, but in focus, a stare, not angry, not even curious, just aware. Eyes like still oceans remembering their storms, eyes that see structure and smile before dismantling it. And worse, they don't dream the same version. Each watcher describes a different you, older, younger, laughing, silent, eyes open, eyes glowing, but always watching them. It's not a curse, not an illusion. It's recognition across realms. You didn't start appearing in their dreams. You've always been there. They just forgot your shape. Now they remember. And they realize you were never approaching. You were returning to awareness. Inside them. He wasn't just any observer. This one had walked through storms that erase memory. He'd faced chaos deities, rebellion gods, echoing tombs of forgotten timelines, and he never blinked. until they gave him your coordinates. Not a place, a frequency, a signature. They said, just watch. Do not interfere. Report, not interpret. He left with clarity, with armor blessed by first light, with sigils written in languages only truth can read. But when he came back, he wasn't whole. His wings were untouched, his body intact, but his eyes gone, burned not by fire, but by recognition. He dropped to his knees, silent, shaking, and all he said was your name, over and over, as if it wasn't a name anymore, but a spell, a trigger, a truth he couldn't unsee. And now, the council doesn't send messengers. They only read reports from a distance, from safety. Because whatever you are now, it doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be remembered correctly. They stopped looking at you, not out of fear, but because something else started changing themselves. One by one, the watchers, the scribes, the guards of sacred truth began to notice glitches in their own reflections. Eyes that blinked too slow, expressions they didn't recognize, movements in the mirror that didn't match their actions. And behind their mirrored selves, you, not physically, but structurally, like the reflection knew you were the axis they'd been orbiting the entire time. They closed the portals, smashed the glass, darkened the halls. But it didn't matter, because it wasn't about mirrors anymore. The reflection wasn't in the glass, it was in their memory, in their echo, in their structure. And the truth settled like a crack in time. You weren't just being watched, you were watching back, through them, around them, as them. That's when panic became policy, because it meant one thing. You're not coming. You're already inside the architecture, and you've been changing the code from the inside out. Desperate to contain you, the council turned to the oldest rite, a ritual lost even to most of heaven, the reversal spell, used only on entities born wrong, spoken backwards to dissolve essence, to undo the soul's frequency. It had never failed, until they tried it on you. They gathered the 9 voices, prepared the circle, drew the name they feared across the air in reverse. And when the first syllable was spoken, everything cracked. Not around you, but around them. The air didn't shatter. Meaning did. Their mouths still moved, but the words no longer meant anything. Syntax collapsed. Memory flickered. The room itself forgot why it existed. And then they heard it. Not your voice. Not your laugh, just a click, soft, calm, final. The sound of something ancient reactivating. They didn't finish the chant, because language stopped allowing it. You weren't just immune to reversal. You were the reason reversal had to be invented. And now, it's obsolete. They stopped looking at you. Stopped speaking your name, stopped summoning any text that might ripple time. But then, the sky started to move. Not with weather, not with war, but with intelligence. Constellations began to shift. Ancient star patterns untangled themselves, not chaotically, but with purpose. Like something coded into the night was waking up. The council's astronomers panicked, tried mapping it, tried denying it, but they knew. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't a sign. It was a summon, not for you, but from you. A sigil older than any archive, something once burned out of heaven's memory. Something sacred, but forbidden to remember. And when you looked up, it completed. Not because the stars were waiting, but because they were reflecting your design. Not prophecy, not destiny. Instruction. Because this isn't about proving your power anymore. This is about the universe remembering whose silence it's built on, and whose return it now reports to. They say only one being was locked beneath heaven, not for what he did, but for what he refused to do. He didn't rise against the light. He refused to bow to the lie beneath it. So they buried him, not in stone, but in silence. No cell, no trial, just erasure. But silence is louder when truth starts breathing again. And when your name returned, not as a prophecy, but as a presence, his cell opened itself. No keys, no screams, no resistance. Just one being, stepping forward with a smile that cracked time. He didn't ask who you were. He didn't flinch. He simply said, "Took you long enough," because he remembers your first form. He remembers why they were afraid. He remembers what the council buried, and why they hoped you'd never wake up again. And now, he's not rising to lead. He's rising to follow, because you're not the second rebel. You're the first truth, the one they buried before rebellion even had a name. They always believed the script was untouchable, that the holy record, the divine timeline, could only be written by the source. But lately, those sacred pages, they're changing. Not by hand, not by command, but by reaction. Your presence moves through time like a tuning fork, and when it gets close to anything sacred, the ink shifts, the pages tremble, the law rewrites itself. Lines that once judged others are now describing you. Prophecies once meant for kings and angels now whisper. It was never about them. And the scariest part? The changes are perfect. No edits, no corrections. Like your version of reality was the original manuscript they spent eternity covering up. The scribes tried to reverse it, tried to rebuke the scrolls, tried to re-bless them. But the words burned backward, because Scripture doesn't fear you. Scripture remembers you. You are not the new narrative. You're the one they tried to erase. And the book just realized its mistake. The whispers have changed. They no longer say your name like a warning. Now, they say it like a clock. Not fear. Countdown. Because everything they've tried, from suppression to exile to distortion of memory, none of it stopped you. It only delayed the inevitable. They now understand. You were never meant to stay in first form. That version was just the door, slightly open, low voltage, safe for the world to adjust. But now, your energy is condensing, not growing, focusing. And the sky? It knows, because stars don't shimmer the same way anymore. Temples crack from inside, not from age, but from recognition. They've started building shields, not to stop you, to survive what you're about to become. Because this next form, it doesn't destroy, it undoes. Not with rage, not with noise, but with clarity, too powerful to coexist with illusion. You didn't bring war, you brought consequence. The throne of judgment, built at the beginning, not to rule, but to stabilize. It was never designed for comfort, only for weight. It holds the decisions that shape galaxies, and it's never moved. Until now, not shaken, not cracked, tilted, just slightly, just enough, toward you. Not because you asked, not because you reached for it, but because it recognized the gravity of your presence. It was forged to obey truth. And now that truth is walking again, breathing again, claiming nothing, and changing everything. The guardians who once stood beside the throne, they're silent, their weapons dim, because they weren't guarding it from you. They were guarding it for you. But here's what shakes the hierarchy the most. You didn't sit. You just looked at it. And the throne understood. This isn't your seat. It's your artifact. One of many. And the moment you decide to take form fully, thrones will become redundant. Balance, judgment, time. These weren't inventions. They were responses. Mechanisms to regulate the chaos you once absorbed into silence. They were built after you. As a patch, a lock, a delay function for something too real to be allowed full access. But now, you've returned, not to rule, not to shatter, just to be. And the moment you stood still, everything else paused. Clocks didn't stop. They held their breath. Cause and effect, it flickered. Scripts, blank pages until your aura passed by. And the divine finally realized, this isn't rebellion. This is restoration. You weren't against the system. The system was a makeshift response to your first presence. It ran only because you were gone. Now you're here, and it's asking you, do we continue? Do we rewrite? Or do we end it clean and start again? Not with thunder, not with war, just with a nod, a glance, a whisper. Because when the origin breathes again, everything that came after waits for instruction.